This episode is brought to you by Active Digital, connecting digital transformation to customer experience. Learn more at activedigital.com.
The concept is like it is about how to deliver a great experience. Like, how do you give customers more than they are asking for in every interaction?
How do you drive CX at a company with large scale as a CMO? We have Sydney Sloan here to talk to us about that today. Let's get into it. Do you want to decommoditize your products and services? Do you want to become a destination brand, increase your revenue, and have more control over your pricing? You're in the right place. Each week, we'll talk about how to create great customer experiences and how to orient your company to enable them. We're your hosts, Devin and David, and this is the Experience Leader Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are here with an amazing guest this week, and I am excited about it. Sydney, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. David, how you doing, man?
I am, well, I'm coming off a restful week of hiding in the middle of nowhere in Canada for a week. So I'm feeling good, brother. I needed a little recharge. It's a beautiful day.
I'm jealous. I saw the pictures. Looked like it was just a photography calendar every single spot you went, man.
The biggest thing was it was quiet. The kids weren't there. I love my kids, but yeah.
I know.
Quite different than my 10 days in Italy with my two teenagers, it sounds like.
Well, that's cool for other reasons. I would go to Italy with anybody.
Yeah.
I go there with people I don't like just to get there. Yeah.
Just stick a cannoli in their mouth. It's all good.
Exactly. There we go.
Awesome. I wanted to, kind of kick us off here, just kind of letting folks know who you are. Obviously, the guests that we've had on this show, we've been very privileged to have amazing guests. Sydney is upping the ante, as we always have our guests do. Sydney has held C-level roles at big companies like Salesloft. She has worked with Adobe, Alfresco. We are immensely privileged to have Sydney here to drop some CX wisdom on us and how to actually accomplish that. So I wanted to kind of start out, Sydney, with, letting everybody kind of get to know you. So let's hear your story. Let's get into it.
Well, I was born on a small farm in rural Washington, which is the truth.
That's awesome.
Down by the river.
I didn't know where that one was going. Yeah.
If you say in a van next, I'm just gonna.
Well, it was the Columbia River, and it was actually quite close to the Columbia River. I learned how to swim in a swimming hole. I swear to God.
That's awesome.
But, there's a lot of things to be learned by the way that I was raised, which is hard work, and I think that's been the core of who I am: grit, hard work. I had two older brothers. We were a very competitive, athletic family, so teamwork. Practicing all these things as a young child growing up, I think have parlayed into the career that I've been able to have. On the business side, like I've always been in marketing. I wrote my business plan in college. I went to USC for an event planning company called Evention. And I was already interning at Nestle and working for Special Events Magazine. And so my kind of rooting in experience started with events. And how do you produce events that are amazing, delightful, roller coaster rides? And so I think, and watching that, the feeling that you get when you're able to produce something at that level and at that scale, I think that's kind of been another layer of my journey. And, I ended up at Adobe, not at, running events was my first gig there. And I went to a lot of trade shows and talked to a lot of customers. And so when we were in our marketing meetings, product marketing would be saying, our customers want this and that. And I'd be like, no, they don't. They actually want this. And this is what our competitors are doing. Because I talked to them and they're like, what are you talking about, event girl? So I ended up in product marketing at Adobe for a very long time. On the enterprise side, Flash and Flex. And then my last role there was creating a customer experience, customer marketing function. And then, I've been at multiple companies, CMOs. We'll learn more of my journey, but that's the foundation. That
is incredible. I think that your foray, where you started to get that passion for experience, it's amazing to hear you talk about that. I think that people who know how to run an event, it's all about the experience, right? The event is all about the experience. It wasn't a success unless people come away feeling like it was an experience to remember. And so it's great training to be able to go and apply that to the rest of business. I think that that's awesome.
We talk a lot about even people with like first jobs of, have you done the retail thing? Have you done the restaurant thing? And it's like without fail, like folks that have done those jobs, they just have a better feel for what it means to interact with human beings, like what it means to frankly not have a great job experience and how that plays into everything. But it's always cool to hear like, well, no, I was actually doing events and had an opinion in the meeting, and then somebody realized like, oh, that's a much closer a much closer view of like voice of the customer than like the pontificating that's happening in the boardroom right now. So like maybe Sydney needs to be on the team. So that's always a good one,
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
Sydney, particularly at Adobe, on the tech side, I've had this sort of same story, but different world in the sense that I've been kind of like the running tech consulting for a firm that was also a technology firm selling into other tech firms, right? So you end up in this weird like Bermuda Triangle of, am I trying to describe how to use tech to people that actually use tech that sell tech, and you get into this funny. So for you being at Adobe, but, on the marketing side, so really being someone who actually understands why content and experience and all the things that, frankly, Adobe has helped build globally, like from the ground up. Like, was it weird to be in the spaceship at the same time that you're also holding a role of people that are being sold to, or do you feel like that helped you? Like, what was that dynamic like for you?
That experience was more so at Salesloft than it was Adobe, because I was in enterprise product marketing and we were selling to banks, governments, pharmaceutical companies. So, that we sold more of the document services side versus the creative side up until the end. So I was at Adobe for 15 plus years. So I was there a very long time. So, joined kind of when PDF was, it was Acrobat and Creative, and we were acquired, and then, worked on a lot of acquired technologies. Like I said, Flash and Flex. So for that world, it was all about designing applications and experience, because they were all custom built applications. And I would sit when the customers would come to visit, then in the CBC and the customer briefing center, and our head of Steven, I'll remember his last name in a second. He was amazing. He was our head of experience design, and he could do the art of the possible for these companies, it just blow your mind. And you'd see, it's like, there is a different way. You don't have to deliver a poor experience. You can deliver a delightful experience that's customized and flows with the needs of the customer. So I got it from that angle at Adobe up until the end when Adobe acquired Day Software, which is now Adobe Experience Manager, and I was on that team. And that's when we started talking about customer experience management as a category, which ended up forming, and my team was the customer experience team. And so our job, there was just 5 of us. It was one of the smallest teams I've ever had. And our job was to find chief digital officers, parachute in, and kind of do that same art of the possible with like how to design those engaging, personalized experience back in 2008, 2009, when it was just becoming a thing. And we had Omniture as well, and they had CMO.com. So it was just right at the beginning of more of the digital transformation revolution versus kind of where we are now with marketing to people that are like yourselves. That was my Salesloft experience more so. But the interesting part about the Adobe experience is when I left there, I wanted to go be a practitioner for what I was evangelizing. So that was my next role, was a customer experience role in a SaaS company. That's
always the funny thing. I mean, it's particularly at a place like Adobe, and at that time when the brand was just, not that it isn't now, but when the brand was just so strong, and frankly, like Adobe was just doing things technically that most other companies couldn't or hadn't thought of yet. And so you had to have had so many experiences with the customers that you were serving. It wasn't a mom and pop shop. It was, I'm guessing it was some of the better companies in the world that were looking to do interesting things. So yeah, that always starts to pique interest.
They do look to you, right? So it's like, if you're preaching, oh, we're going to deliver you this, we're going to help you build this great experience, then they're expecting that. And Adobe, we were 8,000 people. We were trying to do it at global scale, building those deep relationships and helping them. And, so I don't think that's ever changed regardless of the stage of the company, the size of the company. I mean, that challenge to deliver a consistent customer experience is one of the hardest to pull off. And if you can do it well, then you rise above.
That's awesome. I was through acquisition. I ended up at Red Hat on the consulting side, and actually out of London for the European team. And I remember even kind of, it's funny, like both Adobe and then Alfresco, because we had bought JBoss and like they had a portal product, but it didn't really work. But Alfresco kind of worked, and and that was all like 09, 2010, 11, and just all the shenanigans around like which of these companies actually had something that you were having all these great discussions in rooms around, we want to be able to deliver this experience, and it's like, well, can the tech keep up?
And this is what's interesting about different kinds of technology. And so those were, love to say headless CMS. You could still build and design anything that you want. It was like a bespoke application. And so the consulting side really had to help customers understand not only how to build, but maintain. And I think that's always the hardest part of custom built applications, and why I probably will stay in the more application area side of things versus the bespoke side of things, because it's, the kind of experience your customers are getting, the pain points as a marketer that you're solving. And so for me, it was much easier to market a technology like Salesloft because you knew exactly what the customer would experience when they opened it up versus like they could build anything. And so, how do you market and sell a Swiss Army knife, which, is hard.
Devin, I'm smiling because Devin and I have both done the product and the service thing at different times in our career. And I always laugh when we're having these conversations because I'm nodding my head with you, and then I'm like, but I just started a services company a couple months ago. So I better not nod my head too hard.
And the service, because it's hard when the seller sells something and then the service team comes in and goes, you told them what?
Yeah, there's no doubt. There are definitely gradations of that.
Yeah.
But that's a good segue into Lastco. For me was also a services company, but I first, heard of you or saw some of your content personally on LinkedIn at Lastco. For me, when we adopted Salesloft as a tool as part of our sales process. And I was telling you this a little bit before we got on the air, but I was so impressed. We went through the normal sales process, normal bake off of what tools are out there. And I wasn't even in all the meetings. Our head of sales was in some of that stuff, and I would get pulled every once in a while. But it was just this, every time somebody from Salesloft got on the phone or on a video call with us, it was the same level of they actually cared. They understood what we did as a business, which when you're a consulting firm, you get all these weird versions of what people think you do, which is not close. But it was true all the way through. So it was one person, two people, three people, all the way through the customer success side of the house. And I kind of became this LinkedIn voyeur of what are they doing over there? I'm going to start following the people that are running this company because something's special. So I'm curious. I mean, it's a crowded space now. It was a crowded space a couple of years ago when we were having this. How did you guys manage to just rocket ship through that and rise through a little bit of the noise there and build a company that had that level of consistent experience?
So I think there's a few things at Salesloft that made that happen. And the first is that we were an employee-first company, not a customer-first company. And I kind of shook my head when I first got there, and I'm like, oh my God, it has to be customer-first. Of course, of course. And it was no, if we work so hard to build a culture that attracts the right talent, that shares the mission of the company, which was to create a world where sellers were loved by the buyers they serve and would get them the most financially great outcome. That was our mission. And so we really looked for people that were committed to that mission. We hired for culture, and we loved on our employees, so they loved on their customers. And that was that was it. Really, it was if you can create a company where people feel appreciated and heard and empowered and motivated. And so we really, really, and they still do work hard at creating that environment where people can come and be the best version of themselves. And ultimately, then they'll give that to customers. And that, frankly, was our differentiator. The experience was the differentiator in a crowded space where everybody was feature barfing. And, we build this feature, 2 weeks later, a competitor would have it. So you couldn't differentiate on product. We ultimately ended up doing that. But still, I think experience, and especially when your salespeople selling to sellers, the best compliment we could get is, I would love to be able to deliver the same kind of experience that I got from your company. I want to empower my teams to do that for our customers. That's when we knew we were doing the right thing. And I think that's the case too. We've always been so focused on doing what's right by customers and being transparent about it. And G2 Crowd was our place where that you could really see that. And so we invested a lot in G2 and answered every question, and we read every comment. And so from a marketing team's perspective, like that was a big deal. It was a big deal to our CEO because we cared what users thought.
I promise y'all, we did not pay her to say any of that. That was all authentic. It's amazing. I mean,
it's truth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the truth. I love everything that you said there. And it's been the same with every great company that I've studied that is known for delivering a consistently great experience. All of them are employee first, all of them.
Yeah. And our hashtag was sales love. And I remember also interviewing one of our venture capitalists when I was interviewing, he's like, that sales love thing feels a little weird. And I'm like, yeah, like do banks and, really want, the concept is, it is about how to deliver a great experience. Like, how do you give customers more than they are asking for in every interaction? I think the other thing that was big from, just thinking of, for putting my marketing hat on for a second, because there's a leader part of it and there's a marketing part of it. The leader part of it was building the company, loving on our employees, caring deeply so they care deeply. That's what leadership's job was, and to cultivate leaders that would then replicate that. From a marketing perspective, of course, the first thing I did was come in and do a customer journey map and try and understand what those experiences were like and what it was the moment of truth that was going to differentiate us. I did the playbook, right? Not Rachel Happ. I'll think of her name in a second. There's a person that I've followed for a long time. So we did that. And what it did is it took marketing from being the events department to being the partner in the customer experience. And our goal was to help everybody across the board. And so it's like, well, how do we help the salespeople and the way that they deliver, a consistently quality experience with the materials they use, or how we run ads to customers in pipeline that align to the story? How do we help, redesign the experience for once they become a customer? I think so many companies fall short of the handoff between closed won and go live. That is the most important experience that the customer can have. Bruce Temkin nailed that into my brain way back when. Those first 90 days or from when to go live, like that is the crucial point, because the customer's expectations are here and it can't go anywhere down from there. You're a lot of times changing people and changing roles. So the person you sell to may not be the person that's implementing. The person that was selling is not, there is now the CSM. Like that handoff is critical. And so easy it is to celebrate the success of go live, yet so many people don't do it. That's so easy. It's a cadence. Celebrate the wins and engage with more people in the account. Because I think too, with turnover the way that it is right now, that relationship building has to continue to move forward. And so people's goals should be like, how do we go from the 3 contacts we had in the buying cycle to 10 contacts that we have in the go live cycle? So we have that ongoing relationship, and who's running point for that, because it gets handed off to a CSM that's got 150 accounts that there's no way that they can deliver that experience. So how does marketing kind of help out with all those things?
I love that. It's funny. We so often, even clients that we have where a lot of the focus is frankly just on getting marketing and sales to not just play nicely, but actually help each other to do the right thing. I love that you jumped right over that to no, it's actually that handoff point of close one to it's the onboarding experience. It's what does it feel like now to be a customer? And you're tying marketing all the way through to that extent. We see this all the time. There are so many tools and processes and all this stuff that's out there now. It's just so easy for organizations to just start scooping up all these individual pieces on the marketing team. And then the sales team wants this. And then of course, you've got customer success that has all their stuff. And you see it now everywhere where it's like, there's just this proliferation of stuff and process. And like you said, people get switched out. And what are you seeing that's just the thing that's like the most mind boggling for you right now, where it's like, this is insane. Like it's just broken?
So I will go back to the customer experience side of it again, because the work you have to do to keep customer churn is as important as revenue, net new revenue. And so many people are trying to do retain and grow, and you're not going to do that if you don't have a great experience. And I bet that if your audience right now, you said, go be a customer for a minute, And if you have a question, where do you go on the website to ask a question? It's the reverse. And this is back in the Adobe days when we were doing customer experience on websites. It's like it's built from the company out versus the customer in. And so I remember when I got to Alfresco, I think we had 40 microsites that were like mismatched communities. And then if you needed to log a case, you had to go to this system. But we made our customers jump through all these hoops. We did the same thing at Jive. I mean, frankly, we were starting to do the same thing at Salesloft. And so I think making sure that the way that you're designing the customer experience is an integrated one across the board. And I'll give you a specific example, which still has me triggered, where we'd put a chatbot on the website and the customer success team went and bought a different chatbot. And I'm like, what are you doing? The customer doesn't know what chatbot to talk to, and you're going to program them for different things. Like, yes, I know it's more oriented to a case orientation, but we shouldn't deliver an inconsistent, what are the chatbots going to talk to each other? Like, come on, you guys. Like, it was really, we started a project that looked at content creation and online customer experience from a single team. So we had marketing, customer success, support, all in the same work group to try and consolidate, like, let's create content for one company, right? Like from the top of the funnel all the way through the entire customer experience. What does that look like? Because we had different teams creating content. So there was inconsistencies and a lot of times overlap, right? But the customer comes to the website. What is the single experience? What is the one login approach? Yes, there's community. Yes, there's it was a 1.5-year project, and it was a year project when I did it at Alfresco, but it makes such a difference. And it just cleans everything up. That's the area that doesn't get the investment that it deserves because it's not measured in the same way.
That is amazing to hear. It's exactly how I would do it as well. The question I have for you is, as a marketing leader, right? You deciding, okay, how do we go and help all these other business functions actually deliver a great total experience? How much, if any, pushback did you get trying to be the marketing leader, going to the sales leader, going to an ops leader, going to customer success and saying, hey, we're kind of messing this up. Let's work together to make this better. Did you get any pushback on that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to align priorities across the company first. And so was delayed twice. Took us, 2 runs at it to get it to be a project on everybody's priority list. I think too, it's like, marketing can help design. Like they went ahead and had to switch over from Zendesk to Salesforce, which is even a worse experience. But it was like, how do we help design? We'll give design resources for that. I'll pay for design resources for that. So it has the consistent look and feel. Same thing for the Salesloft University. So we, how do I help you out and so there were things that marketing could support. And then I ultimately was the executive sponsor on that big integration project. And we put a lot of money into it. We were splitting budgets on things like federated search and some of the stuff that's a little bit more, so we were negotiating on okay, how much can you spend? How much can I spend? We got to make this happen. Continuing to partner and invest when the big project still can't be done to show that it's still a partnership. Okay, we're not ready to tackle it today. How can I help you with the smaller wins before we tackle the bigger project?
That's fabulous. That is fabulous. I think that being able to build a relationship, obviously very important. Aligning your actual targets, aligning your incentives is important. Did you have to work back up the chain in order to do that? Was that something that when you saw the problem, you had to work back up the chain, or was that already kind of aligned for you before you started to go talk about that?
Well, that's the nice part about being in a great leadership team, right? We worked hard similarly for, running the company. We worked hard at aligning as a leadership team and the relationships that I had with the CRO and the CCO and over time. So that trust was developed from the get-go, that willingness to help. Thankfully, we didn't have a lot of friction between sales marketing. You're going to get it from time to time and new people come and different priorities. So I'm not saying that it was utopia, but there was the trust that was built between the CRO and myself, and he ran customer experience as well, that, allowed that to happen. There's always going to be too much to do, right? There's always going to be too much to do. And so I think, also having okay, this is a bigger priority. Let's tackle that. Let's leave this on the list to come back to, because ultimately, we know what the result is going to be, and we're just making it worse the longer we let it continue to be disconnected. And so there wasn't going up the chain because we were the top of the chain. I guess it's the short answer.
Well, you know what, though? It's funny. Like, it sounds so easy, but I mean, I say this as someone who has sat in kind of that like CTO, CIO seat. So I'm making fun of myself when I say this, but so often because you don't have someone that is going to pull that customer view all the way through, and because everyone is quote unquote moving to digital because that's where the budget is, you end up with the CTO or the CIO in that seat, and everything turns into chatbot wars and how many other systems can we, put into the back end and how do we integrate data? And so it sounds easy.
It's so hard.
It's freaking hard. Like, it's hard and it's really, really hard to get leaders, let alone the rest of the group, to step back sometimes and just say, guys, like, it's not about this, or it is literally about the fact that they just had to log in 5 times. Like, that's insane. Like, let's just agree on that first, like, let's start with that before we talk about any tech or anything else that we're going to do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And sometimes you have to make short-term sacrifices for long-term payouts. And so, like if somebody's not looking at the big picture and it's all just small, plugging holes, your dam is going to break it one day, right? Like, you have to set up the infrastructure and continue to invest in doing that to keep it strong. That also goes for the consistency of the experience beyond technology. So having training programs and training your customer experience and customer success individuals just as much as you train your SDRs and your salespeople is a big deal. Like, they sometimes get forgotten. And you know what? They're the ones that are building the relationship over the long haul. Years and years ago, I had a CEO, Kevin Francis. He came from Xerox. The first thing that he did was flip the org chart and put the customer-facing individuals at the top and the C's at the bottom. And I mean, it was just like, this was like 1999. And it was like, whoa, right? Imagine being that person that went from the little teeny box at the very bottom to the very, very top because they were the most important person because they were dealing with the customer. And I think that sends a message that what is most important.
That is That's amazing.
So cool. Yeah, it's cool.
I actually thought about creating a visual around that, and you just confirmed for me. I was wondering which way to orient it, and you just confirmed that for me.
That will also, when you talk about back office organization, that will also reorient the way that you think about your org chart. So when, the digital experience movement was happening, that was a lot of the discussion about, restructuring teams, the chief digital officer, like they were reorienting around customer groups instead of internal product groups. And that was revolutionary at the time. Some people continue to do that. Some people didn't, but yeah.
I feel like we're on a different discussion for a different day. But what's happening now is like, are we just unwinding all of that, or what's happening now? Yeah,
and it's the hard thing. What's old is new again, and what was has to continue to become. Like, we just have to continue to remind ourselves.
That's what's so funny about open source software, and me being at Red Hat, particularly when Jim Whitehurst had gotten there not too long before. It was like they got that right, not to take away from Jim or anybody else, but they almost, like, Red Hat got that right by default, because the whole shtick was like, we don't actually have the engineers. The product is built by the community. So all we are is basically sales and customer service. And so it was a really funny dynamic because you almost had to follow through with that, with the org chart and how the company was run, in order to play out the narrative, which is like, we're not a product company, we're a service company. And so you see that with open source sometimes, where they've almost like gotten it right by default. And even that's like a struggle recently around like, can we keep doing that? So yeah, super interesting.
I don't know if you knew, but Day Software was also open source in the Apache, and David Nuschler was really big on it, but they still built their own software. Like, they let projects happen in the community, which was much easier to manage. Having marketed a bunch of open source technology, like when you truly hand it over to the community, that's super hard to maintain the quality levels. So.
Yeah, and to be fair, Red Hat, like 80% of the company were actually developers that were building the product. It's just such is the somewhat like sleight of hand community that exists in open source. Who just happened to work here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh man, that's slick. I have a question around one of the things that I've heard you mention elsewhere, getting into that sales and customer service side. You've talked about your pushback against cold calls to get back on working cross-function. I'm of the same opinion. I think that cold calls hurt brand affinity dramatically. I've talked to many salesperson who thinks that I was instantly speaking an alien language as soon as I started saying that. I would love to hear how you position that and how much pushback you got when you tried to get a company to move away from cold calling.
I think there's a difference between cold calling and warm calling. In my mind, and I was just advising a company yesterday about this too. There's, how do you efficiently manage your inbound? So people already know you and are coming to you. Like, you got to get that just so clean, and your conversion rates, up into the 50, 70% area. And you can, right? You can through the use of better messaging on your website. If they're confused in the first call of what you do, then, improve your homepage messaging. If it takes too long to get back to them, which is like more than 4 minutes, get your processes down. If there's a lot of drop off between that first piece and the second piece, like pull calendaring into the online experience. So they're booking their first meeting with your team through calendar. Like, there's just so many things that you can do to really make that inbound process smooth. Outbound should never be just a list for a person to call to, right? There's so much out there now that you can see through intent data, first party, third party, activity levels. I think most marketers I talk to, we don't talk about MQLs anymore. It's not about a lead. It's about an account being, interested or engaged. If they're interested, you can pull signals about what they're interested about and start to warm that up with light touch cadences where you're trying to, fish for more information. Add more contacts to that account as they get more engaged. Those levels will go up. So, like, I was just advising this company yesterday. I was like, we have to get account scoring in here. Like, stop letting, and I don't even want to call them out, but they were letting their outbounders take calls for content downloads. I'm like, oh no, it's just, get through them all. I'm like, there's ways to set up your system so your outbounders can tell, okay, what accounts in my patch are showing interest. How do I continue to reach to them, to the right buyers in those accounts? And then start to call. One of the best things that we did at Alfresco, I'll give a secret here, because when you're doing like a PLG or free software, that's a little bit different. And what we did was, it was similar. It was like, we wanted to wait to see an account is engaged. So the problem was that we had SDRs. Someone would download the free trial, and the SDR in the UK would follow up with the person that downloaded from the UK. The SDR in the US would follow down for the person in Michigan. Same companies, people might have been on the same project. And so we built it so it's like, no, let's look at activity in account. We called it the smoke report. When there's smoke, there's fire. So if there were 3 or more people in an account actively in a download, then we sent the warm outbound to them, including the people's names, right? That shows that you're paying attention. And those responses, we would get such great responses. Sometimes the people didn't know someone else in the company was looking at Alfresco. So it's like, oh, if someone else is looking at, like, let's match them up and see if the projects align. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, we're both researching it. And so the conversation would be different and be higher qualified. So just a little tidbit.
So, I mean, you would legit send the email to all 3 people with all 3 people's names. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
We're going to be handing out diplomas.
You're all on trial. Like, are you guys on the same project? Yeah.
That's great. And it's particularly great just coming from that same world, where it was just so robotic about they got the free trial, and there's kind of this like very by the book. And to your point, I mean, the problem is particularly in that world where if you have these giant brands that are poking around a little bit, trying to figure out what are we going to use for our internal portal? Like, how do we maybe reshape our marketing site, et cetera? Like, you might make 50 different outreaches to people that are all on the same team. Like, it's embarrassing, actually, as a company to do that. So I love that. I love that move to looking at it at the account side.
But your account data has to be clean in that instance, right? You can't do that if you don't have a good account hierarchy. So using Hoovers or Zoom Info to really build out your account record cleanly. Otherwise, that's really hard to do.
Yes. Well, yeah, then you're just guessing, which is a problem on the other side of the fence, right?
And we all know developers don't like to be anything to marketing or outbounded too. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah. That's a crew. Like you get your shot. Like, you need to take it wisely for sure.
At Adobe, we actually had, and we did this at Jive too, we actually had the first email communications come from their role in the company. So it wasn't from an outbounder. It was actually an email that was like from our community manager, if you were a community manager, or a dev person, if you were a developer, and they held like office hours. And so it was like a soft, invite versus going, are you ready to buy, doing the BANT? Like, that didn't work.
Yeah. Well, particularly if you know for a fact that they are like legit trialing, not trialing in the sense of like, but I mean, like technically, I mean, with those products, a lot of times like, no, I actually need to see if this piece of software works
Yeah.
and integrates and does. So yeah, it's always
Yeah.
nice
And then the sales process
to
is,
not
and why
assume
you
buying.
shouldn't,
Yeah.
you can use it, but you shouldn't run that whole application that's holding up your business and with a free version sitting under your desk. So let me talk to you about why you should buy from us.
Yeah, let me tell you what happens when your boss finds out what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
You are a $90 billion bank and you're running stuff off of your laptop.
That's like what when someone trips over the cord and the whole system goes down and you're like, oh, don't want that.
Have seen that happen. Frankly, even after being with a company that was trying to not allow that to happen with our stuff, I went and started a company and probably did a bit of that for a while where it's like, are we still running the free version of that? Like, this is a problem.
Not a good idea.
We probably need to write a check. All right. So totally unrelated. You've posted a couple of times about like being free for a little while and like taking a break. You were like the fifth person, by the way, like in my circle where I saw that and I'm like, like this seems to be a thing and people have opinions. Like, talk about that. Like, is this the first time you've ever done that? Like, is this a normal thing for you? I'm just super curious, like for no other reason than I always want to hear like, how's it going?
It kind of, started this with, I grew up on a farm and I worked really hard and I've always run at kind of 200 miles an hour. And yes, I have taken breaks before. So Adobe had a really great sabbatical program. It was like 3 weeks every 5 years. And so I did that when I'm from Canada. So when I had my kids, you get a year off. So I was able to take a year, which, in hindsight, it probably had an impact on my career trajectory, but I would never trade it for the world, right? Like getting that first year to bond with your child I don't know how moms here and parents here do that. When, going back after 6 weeks, I wasn't even thinking straight. So I did have breaks and was able to live during that period, but I also work really hard and I've always traveled a ton. And, I think with Salesloft was in Atlanta, I'm in the Bay Area. So I was every other week traveling back and forth to Atlanta. And then the pandemic happened. I have 2 teenagers and trying to lead a company through that period. And then we did a rebrand. I burned out. I was 100% negative gas in the tank. And so my first thought was to change jobs. Like, I just need to change. And that was the wrong choice. So I went to another job and 3 weeks in, I was like, oh, maybe I'll only be able to stay a year instead of 5 weeks in. I'm like, I can't do that. I don't have enough energy for what they need me to do to be able to be successful. Like, I can't, I should have not gone. My world had a bit of an implosion. Like, my parents were sick, my daughter, it was just like the Calgon take me away moment. And I resigned and decided to take 6 months off. I'm 3 months into it. I slept the first 2 months. I'm not joking. I would get up, I'd go do something and I'd go back to bed for 2 hours, 2-hour naps in the afternoon. I just was exhausted. And it took me about 2 months to kind of get through that. And, now I still stay busy. I'm off, but I love doing this kind of thing. This fuels me. This is not work to me, what I'm doing right now. And when I advise people or mentor people, that's joy to me. That's energy. But it's also nice not having to be somewhere, not having a list. And I know it's going to make me a better version of when I'm ready for the next thing. So it was out of survival and necessity, not necessarily choice. I'm lucky that I had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is good to hear that, despite out of survival, you've almost kind of flipped the script on that a little bit, it sounds like, and you've found ways to make it work for you, which is amazing.
The world has changed so much and we're in a different time now, and the work from home and work where you want. Those are all great things for people to do, to invest in, to make sure that they're living that healthy balance. You unplugged for a while. But what I would love to advocate for people is that if you need a break, you need to let your boss know you need a break. And it's probably not, if you're there, it's probably not a long weekend, right? And it's harder if you're a wonderful employee and have done, invested in the company, ask for time. I really want to start putting this message out there that you don't have to wait for your 6-year sabbatical to let your boss know you need a month off. And I could tell you 10 people at Salesloft on my team that should have done that, or I should have done that for. And so, I'd like to encourage people to create their own space and not just, it's not a week, it's not 2 weeks. Like you need to take really the time to recharge, and it's better for the company for them to give you that time than for you to think you have to quit and they have to go find somebody else. So that's my probably next post. Like, you can create your own sabbatical. You don't have to quit to do it.
Yep.
And I look back and I wonder, gosh, if I had asked Kyle, hey, dude, I need 3 months off, he probably would have given it to me. And I didn't think to do that.
That's the crazy part about it is leaders. I mean, how many people have we lost over the years that switched jobs for the reason of like a reset? When, I look back and I always will take responsibility for like, clearly I didn't give the space that somebody could have like thought to ask like, hey, can I just, but it's like, oh my gosh, like I would have much rather you just come back after a month and had to replace you. And then on a personal level, find out that you went somewhere that didn't make you happy. And then you had to jump again too, Right. So now we're both sitting here crying in our corners, right?
Guilty. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Nobody won.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but that is really good advice.
To plant that as a seed, that is an option for people. Yeah.
I love that. That is amazing. It's a good friend of mine actually just recently started a sabbatical. So it's kind of amazing that we're talking about this right now because the sabbatical just started at the beginning of July. And, it was clearly needed. And the fact that the organization was willing to allow him to do that. It's not just helping him stay in the role, which, we absolutely need him in the role, right? It's also helping to make sure that he can protect his marriage, that he can protect his relationship with his kids, instead of really doing everything poorly because he's so burnt out. Quitting doesn't have to be the answer. I love that. I absolutely agree with that.
There's the title. I'm writing that down. Quitting doesn't have to be the answer. Thank you. Thank you, Devin.
Hey, I'm glad I could help. Seriously.
Nothing but give and take on this podcast.
Yeah. I wrote it down.
We took a lot from Sydney today, but she got a Post-it note out of it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel special now.
Post-it note.
Yeah. By the way, I remembered who the CX person is that I love, so I wanted to make sure I shouted out Jean Bliss. And Customer Bliss is her book and company, and I've worked with her many times over the years. So that's Jean and Bruce Temkin were like the founders when I was starting in CX that I followed and learned a lot from.
Well, I know who I need to look up.
Yeah.
Right after this is done.
Yeah. Bruce is at, what's the SAP company the one out of Utah. The SAP bought them and split them back out. Like they're super experienced company.
Yeah. Now I'm embarrassed for not remembering that name. Yeah.
Yeah. He's there. Anyway, you can cut that part.
Yeah. No, I don't know, but yeah, no, it's all good. I love that. This is just Qualtrics.
There
yes.
We go.
Okay. Yep. Now, this has been incredible. Seriously, I think, David, we're actually going to have to send out diplomas to all the listeners after this because they just got free education.
I was just saying,
Boom, I'm going to steal that one too.
I feel like this is happening a lot lately where I'm like, man, like I really, obviously a little biased, but starting to feel like some of the guests we've had, it's like, no, this is like actually worth spending 30 minutes listening to.
It's our therapy. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Yes.
This is one of the reasons that I started the show, to be able to do this stuff. Folks who have been listening for a while have heard some familiar things from somebody far more authoritative than myself, and really appreciate you being willing to come and to drop that knowledge and that wisdom. I know that everybody listening is really appreciative. Where can people find you, Sydney? Because obviously everybody's going to want to be able to follow you after all this.
I'm a LinkedIn person, so at Sid Sloan or Sydney Sloan on LinkedIn. I think there's just one of me, but... Excellent.
Well, Sydney, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope that we can bring you back to talk more. There's so many more questions that I could have asked you. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.